Our last discussion about George Orwell focused on comparisons between his novel 1984 and today's manipulation of society and media. We talked about how Orwell's warnings about controlling language, politics, and media relate to modern issues like social media echo chambers, misinformation, and the manufacturing of consent. We also touched on concepts like newspeak, doublethink, and constant surveillance, and how they find parallels in contemporary information control and privacy concerns.
So what are the highlights in comparison, and how does it apply to the characters in that novel? Hey Google, what was my last question?
I heard. Summarize the last discussion we had about George Orwell.
So, hey Google, my follow-up is, how does what happened to the character in that novel compare to today when we see information being manipulated and media's control?
In 1984, characters like Winston Smith face extreme consequences for challenging the party's information control. They are constantly surveilled, psychologically tortured, and ultimately re-educated to accept the party's manufactured truth, losing their individuality and ability to think critically. The novel shows an impoverishment of public discourse where citizens can't express true thoughts. Today, while we don't typically see such extreme physical and psychological manipulation on an individual level in most societies, there are parallels in how information manipulation and media control can affect people. For instance, the spread of misinformation and fake news can lead to people forming opinions based on false premises, similar to how the party rewrites history. Social media algorithms can create echo chambers that limit exposure to diverse viewpoints, effectively narrowing public discourse and potentially hindering critical thinking, much like newspeak was designed to limit thought. This can also lead to a sense of intellectual isolation if individuals struggle to articulate feelings outside of dominant narratives. While not thought police, the constant online monitoring and data collection can evoke a sense of pervasive surveillance, impacting privacy and potentially influencing behavior due to the awareness of being watched. Would you like to discuss specific examples of modern media manipulation and how they might relate to Orwell's ideas? Or explore
Yes.
the psychological impact of constant surveillance in today's digital age?
Both.
To vote in Hillsborough County, New Hampshire, you generally
Hey,
need to be a
Google,
U.S.
stop.
citizen.
We're talking about both. I meant both in context of information control. Hey Google, I meant both, not vote, both, for information manipulation.
My apologies for the misunderstanding. I can definitely give you information on both voter registration and finding your polling place in Hillsborough County. Would you like to start with details on how to register to vote?
Hey Google, we were talking about George Orwell's and you asked me, would you like more information? And I said both.
Yes, we were just discussing the comparison between George Orwell's 1984 and today's manipulation of society and media. I asked if you'd like to discuss specific examples of modern media manipulation and how they might relate to Orwell's ideas, or explore the psychological impact of constant surveillance in today's digital age. Which of those would you like to hear about first?
My answer was both, B-O-T-H, both.
Understood. You'd like to discuss both specific examples of modern media manipulation and how they might relate to Orwell's ideas, as well as the psychological impact of constant surveillance in today's digital age. Let's start with examples of modern media manipulation. We can see parallels to Orwell's ideas in things like the spread of deepfakes, which manipulate images and audio to create false narratives, similar to how the party rewrote history. Also, clickbait headlines and sensationalized news can oversimplify complex issues, potentially limiting nuanced understanding, just as newspeak aimed to restrict thought. And the use of targeted advertising based on personal data can feel like a form of subtle manipulation, as it shapes the information you see based on your perceived preferences. Would you like to hear more about how these compare to Orwell's concepts, or should we now move on to the psychological impact of modern surveillance?
Psychological influences.
When it comes to the psychological impacts of constant surveillance in today's digital age, research suggests several key influences. Feelings of being continuously watched can lead to heightened stress and anxiety, and a reduced sense of personal autonomy and trust. This constant awareness can also impair cognitive performance, stifle creativity, and contribute to mental fatigue or burnout. The erosion of privacy can provoke reactions like resistance, disengagement, or even a sense of learned helplessness. People may also engage in self-censorship, altering their behavior or what they post online because they know they might be observed. Interestingly, studies even suggest that being watched can impact involuntary perceptual processes, making people quicker to detect faces, which hints at a deeper unconscious influence on how we perceive the world. Would you like to explore any of these specific psychological influences in more detail, or discuss ways individuals try to mitigate these effects?
How do they mitigate these effects?
Individuals try to mitigate the psychological effects of constant surveillance in a few ways. One is through self-regulation, where they change their behavior to be more socially acceptable when they feel observed. Some also try to unplug from technology to reduce anxiety and regain a sense of control over their information. Additionally, advocating for stronger privacy laws and regulations for both companies and governments is another way to address systemic concerns about data collection and surveillance. Would you like to know more about self-regulation, or perhaps how privacy regulations can help?